concept of the library is actually, in my mind, what I would call the concrete abstract. So I treat the library as a symbol of the comprehensive representation of knowledge. That is, how do we represent the totality of human knowledge? And so I put together a little show called Alexandria, which is about the Great Library. And yes, like literally the Great Library, yes, literally books, but also the trajectory of our representations of the totality of human knowledge, including, the totality of the internet, the totality of the research frontier, trying to generalize a little bit. And part of the reason that Alexandria is so famous is that it burned. So, as is a depiction of the fires at that great library, some huge fraction of the world's scrolls were stored up in a single location. And if you put fire to that single location, the accumulated knowledge and wisdom of centuries of human civilization could just go up in smoke. And to me, that actually is this really deep symbolic loss. I think it's a general feeling. It's like part of why Alexandria is so special. And in some ways, the library is the place where you preserve the totality of knowledge that has been created, recognizing that a particular person will die, but the scrolls and the books that they left behind will continue to exist. And so human knowledge can accumulate in a way that's different from every other animal, creature, or known being. Super quick overview. So I want to talk a little bit about what I see as like modern great stores of book sets, so great libraries. A lot of them are custom. Second, a description of like sort of a personal process around how I organize the library with respect to my life, what I'll call library projects. And finally, how to like represent books, generally speaking. You'll see that a lot of these are in Google Docs. But I'll start with the library projects. So the idea is pretty simple. There are a ton of books here, but how do you represent them in your life? Because what a book means to one person or another can change dramatically. And so this actually describes a totality of life missions. Everything from building beneficial AGI to understanding creativity to surviving deadly events, becoming a great decision maker. Really like comprehensive representation of what a person might want to do in their life. And it maps that total representation of my life's projects to a set of books. So for example, if I'm interested in understanding how to become a great decision maker, it will describe the set of books in my library. So you brought up Charlie Munger. So his written wisdom, his almanac is here. All of the books that are relevant to becoming a great decision maker. So I read Barron's Thinking and Deciding, the canonical textbook in the space, and ended up writing a huge number of really like research docs on how to decide effectively, believing that decision making was central to everything that I did. So do I decide to create an event around the Great Library? Do I decide to read one book versus the other? How do I master this process of decision making itself? But more generally, this sort of like 31 pager is just a representation of every major goal in my life and the books that are connected to that goal, so that as I'm going through the process of, say, creating new mathematical foundations, I know exactly which textbooks and standard mathematical books I should read and consult. And so I guess I kind of want to propose that we should have novel representations of books which are not just connected to the fact that they're interesting, but are connected to what they're doing in our lives, and read the books in the context of those projects so that when you are acting in the world, you can act on those books. So the next major idea is this. It's the meta reading list. So I guess I have a long-standing obsession with reading lists. And whenever I see one, I grab it and I add it to my list of reading lists. So this is, for example, Patrick Collison's bookshelf. And Patrick, plausibly you've heard of him, he's the founder of Stripe and runs it and has a very high quality worldview from which he came up with fast grants and funded it and ran it as example of pushing human knowledge forward. This is a body of books that he knows and he loves, and I guess I'd recommend it to friends whenever they bring up a book that's on this list and I think, oh, well, you love Poor Charlie's Almanac, some of the folk in Silicon Valley who love this book also really love this bookshelf. Because a person's bookshelf is, in many ways, this an intimate representation of the totality of their worldview. Like, here's the topics that they consider, here's what they see as deep. And the difference in say, bookshelves between Eliezer just put it down. Okay. Eliezer Kaski's bookshelf is usually here, and I was going to contrast it with the sort of technical world. Brett Victor is maybe a decent example. So Brett Victor, for those of you who don't know, is a sort of phenomenal Silicon Valley designer. He's an ingenious designer, and has a lot of incredible works. And most of his books center around deeply thinking about fundamentals. So, Faraday, all of the great scientists and their trajectories, Ingens, the mathematician's apology by Huygens. A lot of really deep works mathematically, but I also came up with a categorization scheme for his book set. I have assumed that this library, the Brett Victor Library, produces higher quality thinking than any library that I've really seen. And whenever I'm interested in being inspired, I go to Brett's library and ask, like, what parts of Brett should I reincarnate? I'll share this with you guys. Basically, the Santa Fe Institute has this glorious library. They're a renegade research organization. Andreessen Horowitz has this great library. There are a bunch of technical reading lists too. But in general, the thought here is really, when you see something very deep, or know a person who's very deep, often behind that is a full representation of what that depth is made up of. And capturing that representation in the reading list, in my mind, is a really beautiful thing. I guess second to last is really, how does one organize one's knowledge? So the library that you're in right now is actually represented in this massive spreadsheet with thousands of entries appropriately categorized with dates to purchase. Ideally, the email address, the email listing's dead now, unfortunately, but the email address of the authors of the book, and is really how I try to represent my own worldview. It's really, this set of books represents everything that I think about, everything that I work on, everything that I reference. And if you want to know, the parts of sociology that I've thought through in depth, you can actually just go to the sociology section of the library and see, the coverage of like Jonathan Haidt, of Dirk Heim, all of the works, right? And the categorization scheme is also somewhat interesting. So these are the major categories represented, from intelligence and information to creativity, military and political philosophy to textbooks and computer science, chemistry, bio, etc. I think of the topic scheme is also relevant because often when you're making big life decisions, you don't know about an entire field. It's really hard to recognize that there's a tremendous amount of human knowledge out there about whatever you're thinking about, and you can and should engage with it. In a lot of ways, over the last 2 years, I feel like the value's been cut a bit by large language models. It's now possible to just ask these models to give you answers that you couldn't really have gotten otherwise. And so there is some sense that this was once the only way to access a body of deep ideas that is now made accessible, which is sort of part of the beauty of things. But I do want to finish off by just saying that we're here together on this journey towards this sort of creation of more and more knowledge. And this is sort of like a 50-page that I wrote, just trying to lay out the trajectory of human knowledge representation and the transformations that I anticipate in research and brain computer interfaces. But really I just want to say, we are in a very unusual place. We're self-aware, we've evolved this sort of form of neural life, and through the invention of language and the creation of the printing press, we have the library, where the library can be seen as the sort of biggest representation of what's producible by the printing press. And this will be a moment in history. So as time moves forward, we get large language models, we have the internet. People in the future will represent the internet's comprehensive knowledge representation as, say, being akin to the library, once we have some new and improved knowledge representation with respect to which the internet feels like, something cute or trivial or forgotten or lost. But I think that it's very interesting to conceive of the abstract version of this, which is how is humanity representing their great libraries? What is the Alexandria? And how does it preserve, how effectively does it preserve and accurately represent the totality of human knowledge? Because there are a lot of interesting things coming. So one thing is, books can now be created by intelligent agents that are not humans. I think this is a really big deal in the long term. So Omniscience, obviously, as a book generator, and my company's productized it, and we're trying to create the best books we can. And this is like as bad as it'll ever be, right? So there's a future where the world of books is totally taken over. Like you go search for a book on Amazon, and if your search query isn't directly connected to an existing book, you'll see a representation of a book which can be created for you, which will be as high quality or higher quality than what you would have looked for, right? And the hope is that the total profundity of the contents of the library can be fed into algorithms, which will expose that profundity to us through every means possible, not just through books. And it is the case that the fact that we created these great libraries is why it's possible for us to create intelligent large language models. So I have a sense that there is profound change on the way. And hopefully, it's for the best. Hopefully we can create incredible amounts of knowledge and build new Alexandrias out of silicon, but perhaps they will build themselves out of something new in the future.